Welcome, Ability Summit. It is my pleasure to be here with Brad Smith, Microsoft's president and vice chair. Welcome, Brad.
Great to do this, and we get to talk every so often. It's always fun. Thank you.
It is our pleasure. This is not your first Ability Summit, so
No.
Thank you for coming back. I know everybody at home, everyone who's watching, really respects and appreciates your perspective that you can view from left to right of what's going on in the tech industry and beyond. So thank you.
Well, there are so many people who are involved in this that know so much more than me, but I am more than happy to offer what I hopefully can in terms of a perspective.
Well, let's go back into time for a little bit. We know that Microsoft is celebrating our 50th anniversary. Accessibility has been around for 30 of those years, and you started here at Microsoft in 1993.
Yep.
What are some milestones that come to mind for you when you think about accessibility and the history of technology?
Well, I think it's first great to start where you just did, because I think there's a couple of really interesting lessons when you look at the history of technology and what it means for accessibility. One of the things I've had the opportunity to learn really just from you and the accessibility team here is, first of all, people generally have been slow to take inventions and then adapt them for people with disabilities. It took until the 1920s when, say, there was something like the electric toothbrush, or the 30s, and also, a book that could be read aloud, what we all take for granted today as an audiobook. And then you look all the way, it took till the 1970s to create a curb cut. And I look back at that and say, wow, why did it take so long? And I think the answer, unfortunately, is obvious. For so long, people just didn't focus on this. But there's a second lesson that I know you all really rightly highlight all the time. When you create a product with the features needed for a community of, say, people with disabilities, you're actually, in ways that you may not even imagine, creating a product that's better for everyone. A lot of people use an electric toothbrush. I'm one of them. A lot of people listen to audiobooks or like podcasts. Just think, the curb cut, anybody who's going down the sidewalk and wheeling their luggage or pushing a stroller or a pram, they benefit everyone. And I just think those are the kinds of everyday examples that we should always remember and try to learn from.
That's right. I agree with you. Far too long. But people are finally listening to folks with disabilities who are really adding innovation to the technology that we're creating. How have you seen Microsoft's approach to accessibility change over the years?
Well, I think there's a couple of interesting lessons that one can glean from Microsoft's experience as well. First, turns out we were like everybody. We were slow. We were founded in 1975, but we really did not get started in a significant way in terms of having features to meet the needs of this community until 20 years later, Windows 95. And interestingly, in the latter half of the 1990s, and I would say into the early 2000s, we actually did some really important work. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us here at the time were very proud of it. And I think in the sort of early to mid first decade of this century, we sort of lost our way a little bit, to be honest. We took our foot off the pedal, and I think there's an important lesson there too. Just because you're good at something, you can't count on yourself to be good. You won't be good unless you sustain that focus. We did stage a comeback. And I think the comeback for Microsoft really has had two additional interesting lessons. First, the comeback started not because there was some grand centralized decision, but because interested people who saw things that others did not started to get together on a grassroots basis. They came together in an ERG. They started to, in their own jobs, start to create, say, the services side to provide customer support for people with disabilities. They started to advance initially certain features. And then we got to 2016. The only thing I can really claim credit for was one thing, when I was named president of the company in 2015, I said to Satya Nadella that there were 5 priorities I wanted to advance. And this was one of them, a real focus on accessibility. And I'm not sure I can even tell you now what gave me that belief, but I did really believe it. And so it was so fortunate that there was this array of talent and knowledge and innovation that we then changed how we work organizationally. This is what gave birth in corporate external and legal affairs to a centralized accessibility team. It really led to people like you, Jenny LeFleury, a whole group of others who knew what they were doing. Thank goodness I did not. And so we found people who did. And I do believe that next year, when we get to 2026, I think we'll be able to celebrate a decade of sustained innovation and commitment. And so you see, you need people, and you then need the organization that harnesses the capability that those people have and then ensures that it spreads throughout the entire company.
Let's talk about today. So we are in a very interesting time in the world, and the geopolitical realities are changing. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing outside of the company and how that relates to accessibility?
Well, it's interesting because we've had several years of, call it, expanding regulation for technology overall, including for accessibility, and Europe has been the leader with the European Accessibility Act. And now suddenly I think we've entered, for the second half of this decade, what might be a almost somewhat deregulatory phase. I do know that we all have to appreciate that this is also a challenging and uncertain time. People may be thinking about or reading or hearing about cuts in social spending or other programs upon which they rely. So I think we always do need to think about that in every time. But I will say, despite that, when I step back and think more broadly, and especially about issues around accessibility, I still also see so many causes for optimism.
I think the responsibility that we all have to accessibility is really important as we look towards our favorite topic, AI. And I'm really excited to talk to you about this. We have a lot of folks out there who are just learning about accessible AI. What would your advice be for our community, folks that are watching today, around adoption of AI?
Learn it by using it.
Yeah.
I think it's super simple, actually. But that's always been the lesson with technology. I was an early adopter of the personal computer. Sort of dates me. But literally, I was the first person to carry a personal computer into the federal courthouse in Manhattan. This was in the fall of 1985. And I did it because I wanted to have it to do my work, working for a federal judge. And the same thing basically happened a year later when I went to a law firm, I really wanted a PC on my desk. That's how these things start. And then other people say, what is that? How does it work? What are you doing? Wow, why can you do that? That way I wish I could too. That leads to the so-called power users. First thing I would say is, if you like this, like a co-pilot, something I use in my work and personal life every day, put it to work, experiment, learn how to use it more. And especially if you like your colleagues, and hopefully you do, or if you're in a leadership position, share what you learn. And when you encounter somebody who knows more than you do, embrace it.
Yeah.
And put it to work. I think more broadly, we are at a point in time when we're obviously investing in the technology, we're investing in skilling, we're really focused on trust as a key pillar of this, but it is broad adoption and making sure that this is genuinely useful for everyone. And it is. I have used it enough myself. I've seen other people use it. This is going to be a game changer, and it's definitely going to be a game changer for people with disabilities. We're seeing this. It's, again, like the electric toothbrush or an Audible book. It turns out for people with neurodiversity needs, put it to work. Use a co-pilot. It's even in some ways more beneficial. And we will find so many things that we have yet to discover, and we'll all learn from that.
And I know we have an announcement around skilling. Do you want to share?
Well, I'm sharing in some ways your news, but I'm delighted to report that we have just crossed the 5 million mark. 5 million people around the world have taken Microsoft accessibility training. And I think that is great. I mean, it just shows this is what we need to do. It's what we are doing. We're taking something like this 20-minute course, getting it out into the hands of people around the world. I also would be the first to say, I feel that we're still at the early stages of AI skilling across the board. We have so much that we'll continue to learn about what kind of programs are most beneficial, how to partner with the right organizations, how to bring this into schools and community colleges and universities and through nonprofits around the world. I will say, watch this space. We're going to have a lot more to announce in the coming months and the years beyond.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how we're extending that to the global South.
Well, I think you've experienced this, haven't you? I mean, because you and I both make regular trips to Kenya. I first went, I think it was 2011 to Mawingo. And you had this experience, didn't you, there? Yeah, say a word yourself about this.
Yeah, I do. I met the same folks that you did at Mawingo, and the foundation is doing incredible work to extend connectivity to underserved communities, especially those schools of students and kids with disabilities. So we are really delighted at that partnership and having been able to build out to 14 schools now where kids have access to broadband technology. And, accessibility and connectivity go hand in hand. And it's amazing to see the extension of those fundamental rights.
Yeah. And I do think in some ways, this is sort of a set of messages that so naturally come together. What we're fundamentally doing in the Global South is bringing technology to people who do not have it. And the people who do not have it fall into multiple categories. People who don't have electricity, that's 43% of the people who live in Africa. People who don't have connectivity. That's how we first got involved. That's what took me to Mawingo. It was a startup at that point, providing broadband connectivity. Mawingo is the Swahili word for cloud, so they got the right word. But what you then learn is you get it into schools, you get it into the hands of women. It was often in these villages in rural Kenya, for example, where the women could sit down with a computer and then they could figure out what merchant was going to give them the best price for the crops from their farm. And then it naturally takes you to then ask the next question, how do we reach yet another community? And I think that's what you experienced. And that's one of the, I think, really inspiring things about this work overall.
Well, we're trying to look ahead into the future and look around corners. What are you hopeful for? What does accessibility look like in the future?
Well, I really feel that as we're on our 50th anniversary, I like to talk about the quarter century ahead. What will the world look like in the year 2050? What will Microsoft hopefully look like? There's a lot about the future that we can never discern. But I think it's very clear, given where we are today, when you think about our ongoing advances in AI, what it means to build out AI infrastructure around the world, including in the Global South, in a way that makes it accessible. In the next 25 years, we will build that out as a company and an industry on a global basis to serve people around the world so that everybody can harness the power of AI. AI is going to continue to advance technologically. So will quantum computing. That, I think, is clear as well. And we'll have advances in many fields, especially when you see about what something like what AI is doing for science, for biology and physics and, say, chemistry and the like. There is so much that I think we should be excited about. And I absolutely believe that, not just in 25 years, but in, say, 5 at the end of this decade, what we're already seeing in something like Seeing AI. AI offers so much potential to not just benefit, but in some ways transform aspects of daily life for people with disabilities. All of that is cause for optimism. Now, we also know that we've long lived in a world, maybe since the dawn of civilization, where somehow new problems always arise. People don't always get along. Sometimes countries don't get along. I suspect the people who are doing this 25 years from now, we're still going to have a lot of problems to talk about. But let's hope that they'll look at the kinds of AI advances that we now can imagine but haven't yet created. The way we started this conversation. You mean there was an electric toothbrush and somebody invented that, and somebody invented a book that could read aloud? Oh, that's quaint. Let's hope that some of the advances in our future will look quaint a quarter of a century from now, and that there will be a foundation on which people can stand and imagine even more that they can do for the 1 out of every 7 people on planet Earth, the people with disabilities who will benefit from it. I think that's what you've dedicated your career to. That's what I think so many people who are tuning in for this have dedicated their career to. Thank you, because I think it is changing people's lives.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being with us here today, Brad.
Thank you.